based from my student work, and they showed it as a feature, actually. So I'm very grateful to them.
Well, how did you come to the point that you could then propose to somebody a feature-length film? How did that happen?
Oh, in my career? Well, that aforementioned thesis film, The Passion of Martin, attracted the attention of agents and producers in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And so I received a lot of attention for that film and offers, and I received a writing, directing deal immediately upon graduating film school from Universal Studios. And this was 1990, 1991, and I wrote the first draft of what 11 years later became About Schmidt. That was the idea for my first feature film.
Oh.
But when I finished the screenplay, they couldn't have been less interested in making it. And then I had to look for another topic. I found a comedy set in the world of abortion protesting, based on a story in the New York Times, and somewhat inspired by Ace in the Hole, Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole. And then that became my first feature in 1995.
What kind of success was that?
Awful. It had no success at all. Other than critical success, it received very good reviews, and people thought well of me as a potential director for something else, even though the film itself made no money. It did what it needed to do for my career at that time. And now, I think in retrospect, it's regarded a little bit more highly than it was then. At the time. I think because of my subsequent films, people go back and see that one and say, oh, that's somewhat interesting.
So, in the American production culture, was it a real risk that after the first film, if it was for the official people was a failure, so that would have risked your career, that you have had to stop that? I mean, how did it continue then?
Things have shifted a little bit with with getting an American film career started. I think in those days it was very, very hard, and really forever, to get your first feature made. But once you made one, even if it was mediocre, you were still considered, well, he's directed a feature, and you could kind of get to a second one. Now it seems the opposite. It seems almost anyone can get a first film made.
Yes,
but it's hard then to transfer that into making a second one or into sustaining a career.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. So
But as I say, even from the film did badly only financially. It also because Harvey Weinstein kind of dumped the film. He gave it a very, very poor release. I'm not blaming him. The film may have failed even with a wonderful release, but I also know it suffered from a bad release. But as I say, it received very good reviews. And it was in competition at Sundance. It had very good review in the New York Times, in the New Yorker magazine. David Denby, all those things helped me.
Which one of your films, taken all of them, had the best success at the box office? Was it Sideways or Schmidt?
The last one, Descendants.
Descendants,
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
It has a big star in it.
Yes. Well, so had Schmidt. Yeah. Well,
But my last three films have gone up in box office. Schmidt was one level.
Yeah.
Sideways with no star was even more, and then Descendants with a star was more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it seems that Nebraska will be quite a thing.
Who knows?
Everything I hear about it, but I haven't seen it. So it's, yeah. Well, about the feature films, you are a writer yourself. For example, Smith is written by yourself. How important do you feel that is, that you in a way are moving within your own scheme?
You mean that I write my films?
Yes.
I feel that I write out of desperation to have something to direct. I'm trained as a director. I'm interested in the act of directing. But I have no access to the type of scripts I would want to direct without writing them. they're not making. We don't have Robert Towne. We don't have Waldo Salt. We don't have those screenwriters. Jules Furthman. Where are they? They're working in television right now, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So I have to find, do these things myself. And in a way, of course, I'm happy to be forced to write because it forces me to look inside and mine myself for what I think is then directable, which becomes one's style. It occurs to me that this would be an interesting film. And what is screenwriting anyway? Is it really writing? No, it's imagining a film. And a screenplay is the written record of the imagining of a possible future film. So it is directing in a way, just from scratch. So I'm okay with it. But I just directed a screenplay which I did not write. And I had a wonderful time doing it, and I found I was able to make it no less personal than things I've originated. I also think it's the duty of the director to find ways in which he or she can relate personally to the material and infuse the directing of the film with one's own personal experience. That's your job.
Well, this question about auteurs is interesting in the Hollywood cinema because there is a...
Look, he's asleep. We should...
Yes, well, it's not the first time I see him asleep.
Maybe that's a hint.
No, there's a wonderful book by Richard Corliss that is about American screenwriters, which raises the question that they were as much authors as the directors, and it was in among the director cult that happened. But how do you feel about when you have seen a lot of old films and there is very strong this kind, as you said, that it's a thing that we are longing now, these very strong script writers. So how do you
talk
feel
about Italian cinema from the 50s and you say, oh, De Sica, no, Zavattini. My discussions with Pierre Riccian, when I talk about film with Pierre, we talk about directors, but he goes immediately to the screenwriter, almost with more interest. And I've been learning more about the screenwriters of classical Hollywood films through my discussions with Pierre.
Yeah.
And paying attention to the trends and patterns in what they're doing. So it's crucial. There is no, a film can be anything, but for the type of narrative films that we talk about, it's screenplay, casting, and director.
Are there screenwriters you love, especially that you like? Would you follow some screenwriter in the classical cinema that you American? Sabattini is obvious for Italian cinema, but
I think Zavattini is obvious for all cinema, and he wrote a very good autobiography. No, I don't feel prepared to talk about one particular screenwriter I like. I don't know enough yet, other than to say I'm paying attention.
Yeah. Okay. You're obviously lying. You would answer this question.
I would talk about it if I felt
Yeah.
one level more of comfort, of expertise.
Yeah.
I have high standards. Isn't it time to go watch movies yet?
Yes, it's very soon, don't be alarmed. The same question about American directors. If there's somebody whom you like especially. I mean, that Leo McCarey was something that
but I
could have guessed.
But I don't put Leo McCarey at my top, in my top 10 of directors that I pay attention to.
You mentioned Make Way for Tomorrow, which is something that you would
that film
place. I mean, that in the same family of films that your films, many of your films. So it's same kind of understanding of ordinary people.
In recent years, the American director whose work I return most to is Anthony Mann.
That's it.
For the sense of, just the stories were so great. He had a very, at once moral and brutal approach to his stories, I feel. And also for the type of movies I do, where I try to capture a sense of place in the films. His films are a constant study of keeping the intimate story in the foreground, always with a sense of place in the background, and both in focus at the same time. literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
I'm a great fan of Anthony Mann.
Yeah. Well, it's also some kind of tragedy because in the last stage of his life he went into these big productions, so somehow the system managed to destroy him. Or he made films that were not... I mean that he had noir and he had western and he had...
Although he was kind of changing with the times. I don't know, El Cid is pretty good. I'd love to see Fall of the Roman Empire projected. I never have. It's kind of hard to sit through on DVD. And I've never seen A Dandy and Aspic, or I've actually never even seen Heroes of Telemark, his last completed film. But
no, they are relatively tragic. I mean, that they are not anymore somehow. His films. So it's not often that you hear Anthony Mann. We always think of his westerns, but most people in a way have an idea that Ford is the only one. But is Ford too sentimental for you, or what is?
Ford, I have just in my own personal film watching. It's an evolving relationship. As a kid, I liked him. As an early adult, I didn't. I found a lot of cornball, as you say, sentimental, some misogyny perhaps. The cartoonishness of some of his characterizations, I found I had to be patient with them. And I wandered more into more interesting westerns, I felt, of the 50s and 60s. Man and Peck and Paw, better. But now, in my 50s, I'm finding other Ford, and I want to give him a chance, and because he's such a towering figure, I want to watch more and more to get a larger sense of his work. Pictorially, it's pretty hard to argue with it. What did I see recently? Oh, The Prisoner of Shark Island. I'd never seen The Prisoner of Shark Island. I watched that recently, and that's just a stunning, stunning film. It's also interesting to watch Ford to see how different he was with every DP he worked with. Very different visuals, not very different, but markedly different visual style with every different cinematographer he had. And I was fortunate in that the cinematographer who shot my first 3 films was the son of Burt Glennon, who shot Stagecoach, one of Ford's favorite cinematographers. So I would get the stories.
Well, about acting, when you have somebody like Jack Nicholson, how do you communicate with him? How did you get that astounding performance of About Schmidt? Because he's suddenly so very human that he was kind of technical person for years, and then suddenly he's in all his humanity there. What happened in the process? Can you describe that? As an example of how you deal with actors.
I called Mike Nichols a few weeks before starting About Schmidt, and I said, "Excuse me, you who have directed Jack Nicholson 3 times and known him for so many years, what advice can you give me about directing Jack Nicholson?" And he said, "Tell him the truth. Just say don't think I have to act like a director, I have to do this. Just talk to him. Tell him exactly what you feel." And that's what I did. Because he knows you're lying anyway if you're trying to be someone you're not, or say something in too delicate a way, too polite a way, he'll see right through it. So just don't do that. And that's the best way to work with actors in general. I try to not just a big star, but any actor, I try to cast people whom I can just tell the truth to. That was terrible, please do it a different way. That was wonderful, please do more of that. Let's work like this. That wasn't so good yesterday, what can we do today? Just normal, not with tricks. And he is so good an actor that it's kind of like driving a Maserati, tight steering. Anything I say, which choice of words I would use, he would do exactly that. And then if during a take I see that he was doing something which I didn't really like, or I would say, oh, it's because of what I said, and I might have to say cut, Jack, I'm so sorry, that was great. When I told you such and such, now I know that I meant this word. Can you please do that? And then yes, he would do that. He made me a better director that way.
Well, it's interesting that it's the ordinary America, everyday America. To a very degree you see seldom, you experience seldom, and then you have a superstar in the middle of that, and you manage to put them, to get them in the same.
Well, I told him before we worked, I said, I need you to play a small man. And he heard that, and he did that.
Yeah.
He knew what I wanted. You know, they always tell you, you as a director, you have to study your individual actors to see what he or she needs to do. But the opposite is true. The director, the star, let's say the actor has to study the director to see what film is he trying to make and make that film. And no one's going to be better at doing that than Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
He's studied Houston and Polanski and Antonioni, and he's been with all of those guys and been in their films. Kubrick.
Yeah. So Nicholson, it was quite a turning point in his career somehow. About Schmidt, that he had been kind of in relatively uninteresting films for some years already. And I think it was a revelation, and I think the star appreciates that afterwards. Are there any signs of that he has expressed that he was?
Yes, although it's true that for many years he had been doing perhaps the commercial Nicholson in many films, but also directly before making About Schmidt, he had done a very nice performance in Sean Penn's The Pledge, which was also an underseen film, but a very subtle performance.
Yeah.
And he consciously, I think, manages his career, or he used to when he was making films more often. Say, now I do a commercial one, Jack. Now I remind them that I'm an actor.
Well, somehow it goes back to the small comedies, the silent comedies you mentioned, because also they were always about a small man. And seeing the truth seen in comedy terms, and
yes.
It's just about the same thing. That it's these lifelong influences come through somehow.
Thank you for identifying that, because it drives me crazy in interviews after films when I'm asked, "Why are you so interested in flawed protagonists?" Which I think is the most idiotic question in the world. And I don't know, and I have to be polite because I appreciate the interest in my film and blah blah, but inside it drives me crazy because and then it's pretentious for me to say, well, what about Chaplin? He's a homeless. Why are you so interested in the homeless? It's just that everyone, when you're making comic films, I think you have a certain archetype. Chaplin had his, Keaton had his, Lloyd had his, Max Linder had his, Raymond Griffith has his, etc. And then, not to compare myself to them, but following, looking at them as great examples. Jim Taylor, my co-writer, have for some reason this certain type of protagonist that we find a reliable comic figure.
How is your working with Taylor? How do you work together? Who gives what?
He's asking about Jim Taylor, with whom I wrote the first 4 of the 6 films I've made, and we're going to write my next one together. We started in January. We are always together in the room at the same time and try to make each other laugh. And it's not as though one is better at structure and the other is better at dialogue, as some teams work, or some teams work. You take the first half, I take the second half, then we rewrite each other, something like this. No, we're always together at the same time. One of us writes a page or two, says, okay, I'm ready. We rewrite together and chip our way through the film, through the screenplay. Are we
Yeah.
far from? Are we far from Mastroianni? They're showing speaking of Chaplin is at 4, and then the
No, we are a
Lito
little.
Broca is at 5:30.
Maybe I open. Maybe you have questions now, so let's humanize the situation because I'm such a sadist that he can't tolerate me anymore.
And if any of you have to leave to get to the cinema, we understand.
Please.
I know you began to answer this question with what you just said, but what are you especially looking forward to seeing here in Bologna?
Everything. Off the top of my head, though, speaking of Italian comedies, I've never seen La Grande Guerra, and I want to see La Grande Guerra projected in CinemaScope. My God. Then the Opals film, I've never seen that. What else? Oh, I've never seen Cassandra Cat. I have it on VHS, and it's lousy to see, but and apparently it's not a great film, but it's an interesting and weird film, Yashnyi's film from '63. So there are a number of great things. I want to see the films from 1913. How wonderful is cinema that we can go back in time.
Yes. Please. There you go.
Yes, hello. I was wondering, The Descendants, what was the inspiration for that film, and the fact that it was set in Hawaii? Where did that inspiration come from?
It was the adaptation of a novel, and the very fact that it was set in Hawaii, you have to ask why. To be able to go to be in Hawaii for a year and make a film, it was fantastic.
You were searching for Elvis.
Searching for Elvis?
Yes.
I don't know. For
Low Hawaii.
yeah.
Low Hawaii. These beach movies.
No, it was a lovely human story and set in an exotic location that I thought would be fun to live there and see that reality for a while.
Yes.
So I think one of the things that I think would be great about making movies would be the choice of the cinematographer, because that seems really fun. How do you go about that, and are there other cinematographers that you'd love to work with?
Oh my God, there's so many.
And who are you looking at these days that you really like, that you would want to work
Well,
with?
I can't say that as long as the cinematographer I'm still working with is still alive. I can't. Payne says he wants to work with so-and-so. It's funny, I just finished mixing, doing the final sound mix on Nebraska. My new film is called Nebraska. I showed it at Cannes a few weeks ago, brought it back to Los Angeles, continued editing, and redoing some of the sound, and just finished it 3 days ago. And the mixer, who does the sound, they can be such divas. Temperamental, filled with ego. The whole film depends on me and the sound, those egos you hear about in film. And I have a good one. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's true. A lot of them can be real divas. And so can cinematographers, but in general, cinematographers are some of the greatest people you meet. They have a beautiful, it's like they get to be directors, but they don't have to deal with all the bullshit that a director has to deal with. And they can retain a much purer sense of committing the visual image to something. And the good ones become equally invested in directing the story visually as the director. They don't talk to the actors, but they have to make the actors feel good, particularly the actresses. Even if you're shooting shooting the girl in The Exorcist, she has to feel beautiful. And you need your cinematographer to do that. So that you're busy something, the cinematographer is there. And they can be some of the most delightful, cinematographers and editors are some of the least cynical people who work in film. And it's great to be around them. And I mentioned with Burt Glennon's son, Jim Glennon, now deceased, wonderful guy, made me a better director. And now I work with a fellow Greek named Phaedon Pepamichael. He's my same age, we met in the 80s, and we have a lovely collaboration.
Okay, one last question. Before that I said that I'm sorry I didn't speak about your films because I thought that this is the place to talk about your film, love for films, so we in a way didn't come, so we had such a short period, but I ask now, there's one question and then I'll ask my two questions.
Hi.
Pretty short.
I just wanted to say that I really love The Election. It's one of the best comedies ever.
That's my mother's favorite film among my films.
And I was wondering if you like, because I remember also movies like A Breakfast Club and First Beer's Day Off. It reminded me a lot of those movies. I was wondering if you like John Hughes comedy and if you because you were talking about the light tone before, so I was thinking.
Talking about what?
The light. The leggerezza, the
yeah.
light tone, yes.
Yeah. I can't say I like or don't like John Hughes films because I've never seen them. At the time, I was a film snob, and I thought, John Hughes, I'm not going to see those. Now, I know Ferris Bueller is supposed to be good, and 16 Candles is supposed to be good, and The Breakfast Club was supposed to be good. I never saw them, and I have to tell you, I'm really not very interested in seeing them now. So, no, I'm not a John Hughes fan. You touched upon my film snobbery.
Just one question still.
Speak loudly, I guess. I just wanted to ask you about working with Bruce Dern because you seem to have sort of mined some of the BBS figures, main figures of that time, and Bruce has kind of disappeared for a while. I haven't seen Nebraska, I look forward to seeing it, but why Bruce, and yeah, a little bit about that.
When you go to make a film about an old guy, you're very much a prisoner of who's left. Who's around at the time you go to make the film. So why Bruce Dern? He's wonderful for the part, and I didn't have Henry Fonda, and I didn't have Walter Brennan, and I didn't have Percy Kilbride, and I didn't have Charlie Greatwin. So I have Bruce Dern, and I just made the film in 2012, and so Bruce Dern was the right guy. And thanks for mentioning BBS. And I can tell you, let me share with you a nice moment I had 2 weeks ago. I screened the film for Jack Nicholson and Harry Gittes and Bruce Dern. And I say that not to be a name dropper, but you know, Bruce and Jack, and they all go back, and I wanted to be courteous to those guys, so I hosted a screening. And afterwards, Harry Gittes, who produced for BBS and also produced About Schmidt, and his name Gittes became Nicholson's last name in Chinatown, called me on the phone the next day and said, sitting there in the screening room with Jack on one side, Bruce on another, you behind me, and seeing this film, he said, I felt like I was back at BBS. And I said, thanks so much for saying that.
One last question. What film, out of all films ever made, would you take to a lonely island? One film ever made.
Can I take two?
Yes.
I'll take three.
Yes, even that. I'm a man of compromises.
And forgive how corny this sounds. City Lights in Modern Times, The Seven Samurai, and maybe The Wild Bunch.
Yes, that makes three.
Yeah. Thank you for
Sorry for taking your time.